Everybody wants to know what is going on with coronavirus here in the United States and abroad. And if you've been watching this show throughout the week, you know that there's a lot of updates coming in every single day. And so accurate information is the most important thing. So let's talk about information. How are we going to, in the future, find out what's going on with coronavirus? It turns out that some avenues for information are being blocked off, while others that the Trump administration might not be big fans of are opening up. So let's talk about the blocking off first. The White House moved on Thursday to tighten control of coronavirus messaging by government health officials and scientists, directing them to coordinate all statements and public appearances with the office of Vice President Mike Pence, according to several officials familiar with the new approach. A lot of people reacted understandably to that news, saying that if the government is cracking down on, for instance, doctors, officials at the CDC, NIH, whichever government agency, from communicating about what's going on, that's probably not with the people's best interests at heart. And if Mike Pence is the one that they're gonna have to go through, we know that, again, Mike Pence was not chosen because of his mastery of the science, his knowledge of biology, or the international coordination against pandemics, none of that. He doesn't have any of that. What he does have is he's considered a rock solid loyalist to Donald Trump. And so if a CDC official has a bit of information that they want to spread, and it wouldn't look good for the Trump administration, they go to Mike Pence and they tell him, what happens then? Do we find out about that information? Will Mike Pence decide in that moment that public health concerns Trump's concerns? Do you believe that that will happen? Fingers crossed, because we are in a life and death situation, quite literally. And the New York Times acknowledges that his move appears to be aimed at preventing the kind of contradictory statements from White House officials and top government health officials that have plagued the administration's response. So the New York Times there is being the New York Times, and they're not trying to say anything. They're just saying there has been disagreement. But you've been watching the show, you know what those disagreements look like. So you had doctors with the CDC earlier this week saying, look, we're gonna do everything we can, but we gotta keep it real. It is likely that coronavirus will spread, at least to some extent, in the United States. That is a possibility. That's simply the truth. It's not Trump's fault that that happens. That's how this is going. 50 states have coronavirus infections at this point. We're a very large one. It is likely that it will happen. And so that doctor wanted to get that out. Trump doesn't like that. And so they're going to be cracking down on the ability of doctors to speak the truth. And Trump himself has been spreading misinformation, as we've been covering. He continually, in a campaign rally, referenced 15 infections in the United States at a time when we had 60, kept saying 15 over and over. He made weird allusions to us sort of being down to one case. No one understands what he meant by that. He said that a vaccine is very close when doctors are saying it could take a year or a year and a half. And he's repeatedly said that the coronavirus is completely contained in the United States, which, as we move on, you're gonna find out is 100% not true. And so yes, there are disagreements between top government officials and doctors in that Trump is lying and the doctors don't seem to have any incentive to do that. Now we're gonna get our information from one source, Mike Pence. And we'll just have to see how honest and accurate those bits of information are gonna be. And so, as I alluded to, some avenues for information are being blocked off. It's all gonna have to go through Trump loyalists now. But thankfully, as in other instances where the Trump administration has done the wrong thing, we do have whistleblowers, and we already have one when it comes to the coronavirus. Apparently, officials at the Department of Health and Human Services sent more than a dozen workers to receive the first Americans evacuated from Wuhan, China, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, without proper training for infection control or appropriate protective gear, according to a whistleblower complaint. We're gonna have more details in a second, but just understand that at the same time that obviously people are starting to freak out, in the Trump administration, totally justifiably, they're freaking out about the possibility that bringing people back could be dangerous and could spread the disease. They're like, okay, we got this. We're gonna go and we're gonna get those people, and we'll just send anybody, and they don't need the equipment and they don't need to be trained. Specifically to interact with people that they know are infected with coronavirus. Is it ignorance? Is it willful ignorance? Is it malicious? I can't imagine why it would be, but why would you send people into a situation like that without protective gear? And it's gonna get ridiculous in just a second as we go forward, but without training, without protective gear. Like it's it's entirely cruel for those people, let alone those that they could potentially infect when they get back to the United States and apparently weren't screened. They could spread it to friends and family, coworkers and things like that. Why would you not care enough to give them the training and the equipment? So let's move on. The complaint alleges that HHS staffers were improperly deployed, were not properly trained or equipped to operate in a public health emergency situation. The complaint also alleges the workers were potentially exposed to coronavirus because appropriate steps were not taken to protect them, and staffers were not trained in wearing personal protective equipment, even though they had face-to-face contact with returning passengers. And here is where it's like dark comedy. In some instances, the teams were working alongside personnel from the CDC in full gown, gloves, and hazmat attire. And so, look, my heart goes out to those workers who must have realized in the moment, we have people right there, they're right in front of me, they have coronavirus. The CDC is in full outbreak mode, and I've got nothing. Why is that? Is it because the CDC is being weirdly paranoid? Or is it because the people who sent me didn't know or care what I should do in this situation? And so look, hopefully all of those people are now being looked after, monitored, all of that. And hopefully perhaps this whistleblower account coming out means that in the future the government will be more responsible. Think twice or even once about the training and the equipment necessary when they send people into areas where coronavirus is not a possibility but indeed a guarantee. Hopefully that's a silver lining that could potentially come out of this. But I do want to move on to the last graphic because the whistleblower is now seeking federal protection, alleging that she was unfairly and improperly reassigned after raising concerns about the safety of those workers to HHS officials. She was told February 19th that if she does not accept a new position in 15 days, March 5th, she would be terminated entirely. And look, obviously it's a whistleblower. We don't know this individual's identity, but the Washington Post says that she has worked in the area of public health, this sort of field, for literally decades. And she was right in this instance. And so rather than listening to her, learning from it, they instead tried to quash it, and thankfully it has since come out, and they've tried to send her somewhere else and potentially fire her entirely. And we know how they approach in the Trump administration, that they approach whistleblowers, but again, the whistleblower was doing the right thing. That's what we're up against. For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.